Boomer Music Experience, the August show 2024 with my good friend Randy Helmo, DJ extraordinaire. How the heck are you, and who are we talking about today, Randy?
Good morning, Dave. Yeah, we've got a good one today. It is Sir Van Morrison. And of
Oh,
course, we can all relate to Van Morrison with his humongous quadruple hit back in the year of 1967, Canada's centennial year, too. Brown Eyed Girl. That is definitely his signature song. And it's a good one, too. It's got everything. So, what I'd like to do, Dave, to share with our audience this morning, I'd like to go over the life and career, of course, of Sir Van Morrison, and then take the folks through the different sequences and decades of music, because like he's been making music for 7 decades now. Like, that is incredible. And we'll do that, and then we'll find out what he's doing currently. And then, of course, he's collaborated with a lot of different artists that we need to share with our audience. And then, of course, the legacy, the awards and honors in his lifetime of music. Sir George Ivan Morrison. He was born on August 31st, 1945. He's a singer, songwriter, and musician. This I never knew. From Northern Ireland. I never knew that. I thought he was originally from the U.S. And his recording career, of course, as I mentioned, spans 7 decades. 7 decades. There's not too many artists who can boast about that on their resumes. Morrison began performing as a teenager in the late 1950s. And what he did, he played a variety of different instruments. Now, listen to this. He played the guitar, the harmonica, keyboards, saxophones, and he played in various Irish show bands covering the popular hits at that time. So he's not only an accomplished singer, but musician extraordinaire, like hokey Dinah. That is better than good. Morrison rose to prominence in the mid-1960s as the lead singer of the Belfast R&B band called Them. Okay. And Them, for him, he wrote and recorded Gloria, which has become a mega hit for other artists. And of course, he also had a solo career, which started under the pop hit-oriented guidance of Bert Burns. And Bert Burns, in his life, Dave, he was a key player. He influenced Van Morrison so much in his music. And of course, he wrote with the release of his hit single, Brown Eyed Girl, in 1967. After Burns' death, Warner Brothers Records, of course, Warner Brothers, huge in records back then, they bought Morrison's contract and allowed him 3 sessions to record Astral Works. And that was in 1968. That was his album.
Astral Weeks, yeah.
Yes. Need to clean my glasses, Dave. Astral Weeks. Initially, it was a poor seller, but the album has come to be regarded as a classic.
Yep, it is.
No question about it. And then, of course, Moondance in 1970. Really, that album really established Morrison as a major artist. Wouldn't you agree, Dave?
Totally, 100%. He's, I think his early stuff too, he was finding himself. I felt like his music was that mixing pot of everything. It seemed to have jazz, blues, rock. Like, he just seemed to know, old poetry, Celtic feel to it. I don't know. It was really the diversity in it, eh? I think it was so new. People were going to it at the time. And it's held up. His music has held up extraordinarily well over the years.
Oh, most important. He built on his reputation throughout the 1970s with a series of acclaimed albums and live performances. And there's a couple of live performances later on in the show I want to share with our audience. because it does happen to deal with our local band here in the 60s, The Band.
Oh,
Much
cool.
of Morrison's music it's kind of structured around the conventions of, well, soul music for sure, early rhythm and blues, and an equal part of his catalog consisted of also Celtic music, jazz. Like, he's into several different genres of music here. And just to name a few, R&B, folk, blues rock, soul, jazz, jazz rock. Never heard of that one before, jazz rock. And of course, gospel. So, and with his voice, his songwriting ability as a professional musician, he had it all. And just a wonderful guy, too. Great personality. Morrison's albums have performed well in the UK and Ireland, with more than 40 reaching the UK top 40. He has scored top 10 albums in the UK in 4 consecutive decades, following the success of the 2021's latest record project, Volume 1. So that's, just a few years ago. 18 of his albums have reached the top 40 in the United States, 12 of them between 1997 and 2017, just a few years back. Now, Van Morrison, since turning 70, God, he doesn't look anywhere near 70, in 2015, he has released, on the average, more than an album per year. He has received 2 Grammys and other awards, which we'll certainly mention down the way here. So let's take a look at Van Morrison, his early life. As I mentioned, he was born on August 31st, 1945, in Bloomfield, Belfast, North Ireland. He was the only child of George Morrison, and George Morrison, his dad, was a shipyard electrician, and his mother, Violet, she was a singer and tap dancer in her youth. So, okay. So here we go. So he's getting his musical genes from his mother. Yeah, okay. His father had what was at the time one of the largest record collections in Northern Ireland. And how did he acquire all these records? Well, during his time in Detroit, Michigan, in the early 50s, he collected record upon record upon record. And of course, being a shipyard electrician, that would certainly paid well. He certainly had the money to buy these records. And but Morrison grew up listening to such artists as Ray Charles, Sonny Terry, Solomon Burke. Like, these are all phenomenal singers of the early 60s. His father's record collection exposed Van Morrison to various musical genres. As I mentioned, okay, when it comes to the blues of Muddy Waters, gospel, Mahalia Jackson, jazz, Charlie Parker, and folk music, Woody Guthrie, just to mention a few. And how impressive is that? Man, oh man. Morrison's father bought him his first acoustical guitar when he was only 11 years young. How good is that, Dave? Like,
pretty cool.
11 years young.
Yeah.
And now he's in his 70th year. In 1957, at the age of 12, Morrison formed his first band. It was kind of a skiffle group called the Sputniks. Well, we know Sputnik 1. That was launched in October of that year, and of course by the Soviet Union. So Van Morrison, he talked his father, this is good, he talked his father into buying him a tenor saxophone. And he took saxophone and music reading classes also for jazz from jazz musician George Cassidy. Wow, unbelievable. Morrison saw him as a big inspiration, and they became very, very good friends. So here we have it, Van Morrison. He's surrounded by all this talent, the different producers, like he's right in his element. And he took full advantage, sincerely, of these various artists to promote his own product and gift of music to the world. And he did it so well. Let's take a look now at the years 1964 to 1966. The roots of them, which was the band he was playing with, the band that first broke Morrison onto the international scene, came in April of 1964 when he responded to an advertisement for musicians to play at the new R&B club at the Maritime Hotel, and this was in Belfast. And so they were related because this hotel, the College Square North in Belfast, it was frequented very well, quite a bit, I would say, by sailors. And of course, they loved their music. They just loved it. The band's R&B performances at the Maritime really attracted major attention. And that was an integral start to his music career. Here again, good sounding band, right place, right time, solid reviews. Wow. Dick Rowe of Decca Records, and of course, Decca Records in the early to mid to late 60s, huge record company, Dave. I mentioned that numerous times on our podcast. Decca Records, they became aware of the band's performances, and they signed them, that's the name of the band, they signed them to a standard 2-year contract. And in that period, they released 2 albums and 10 singles. One of the singles, Baby Please Don't Go, which was recorded in 1966 by Sonny and Cher. Like, how good is that? Anyway, it was certainly an opening for Jimi Hendrix, building on the success of their singles in the United States. And riding on the back of the British invasion, which of course, as we all know, was May of 1964, they took a 2-month tour of America in May and June of 1966. And that included, this is very important, a residency from May 30th to June 18th at the Whiskey A Go-Go in downtown Los Angeles. And that was the place to go in the world. I remember watching TV film clips at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles.
Everybody played there. Anybody who was, that was a huge starting point for him, obviously, in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. And that evening, the Doors were the supporting act on the last week.
Wow.
And Morrison's influence on the Doors singer Jim Morrison was noted by John Deesmore in his book Riders on the Storm, which was a hit by Jim Morrison and the Doors, of course. Yeah. On the final night, the 2 Morrisons, that's great. This is so good. The 2 Morrisons and the 2 bands, they jammed together with the song Gloria. Yes. And that's a dance filler. Anytime you play Gloria, guaranteed dance floor filler. So, Bert Burns, he's them's producer and composer of their 1965 hit, Here Comes the Night. He persuaded Morrison to return to New York to record a solo for his new album label, Bang Records. So Morrison flew over, signed a contract, which he had not really fully studied, but that's okay. During a two-day recording session at the A&R Studios, starting March 28, 1967, he recorded 8 songs originally intended to be used as 4 singles. He doubled that. Instead, these songs were released as the album Blowin' Your Mind, which was a great, great album. And incidentally, that album Dave, in 2007, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. The album Blowin' Your Mind.
I have to look that up. I didn't even know about that one. That's cool. It's awesome.
Brown Eyed Girl, one of the songs from that album, Blowin' Your Mind, was released as a single in mid-June 1967. And it raced right up to the charts, right to number 1 on the Billboard Top 100 with amazing speed. And it's a great, great song. Even to this day, even the younger generation today are playing Van Morrison's Brown Eyed Girl. And I do get lots of requests for that song at the many weddings that I DJ during the summer. That is one of the top songs. Whatever age demographics you're talking about here, this is a universal hit by Van Morrison. So, Warner Brothers, step in Warner Brothers. They bought out Morrison's band contract with a $20,000 cash transaction that took place in a warehouse on 9th Ave in Manhattan. How good is that? Like a warehouse. Warehouse in Manhattan, 9th Avenue. I don't know. Anyway.
Yes, it's just bizarre, isn't it?
Morrison's first album for Warner Brothers Records was Astral Weeks, which he had already performed in several clubs around Boston. And it was kind of a mystical song cycle, but the album originally received kind of an indifferent response, Dave, from the public. But eventually, it achieved critical acclaim. It took a while, but finally came through. Yeah. And the album is described by AllMusic's William Ruhlman as hypnotic, meditative, and possessing a unique kind of a mystical Celtic poetry. Let's put it that way. Yeah, totally different, but very, very popular. So we take a look at Moondance. We're now going to take a look at the decade of the 70s just briefly. Morrison's third solo album, Moondance, was released in 1970. It became his first million-seller album and reached number 29 on the Billboard charts. God, I thought it would have been higher than that, certainly in the top 10. Great song, Moondance. Yeah. So the title track, although not released in the U.S. as a single until 1977, it received very heavy play from all the FM radio stations. Yes, yay for FM radio. Into the Mystic was also a great hit for Van Morrison, and it gained a wide following over the years too. So here we have it, Moondance, the album, the solo album. He's creating a lot of hit singles off of this album too. And Moondance was listed at number 65 on the Rolling Stones magazine's 500 greatest albums of all time. I would think it should be higher than 65. I would put it in the top 20. Anyway,
I agree.
I had no say in that. In March of 2007, Moondance was listed as number 72. And this would be on the NARM Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the list of the definitive 200 hits of all time. Now, it's good to know that with producing these albums, and of course, Van Morrison, he's no dummy. He's very smart when it comes to music writing, music producing, singing, the whole 9 yards. And it's good that he had the vocal range incorporating the various genres that I just mentioned earlier. because it gave him the total package for the world to enjoy. Wouldn't you agree, Dave?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think that you nailed it. I think too when you were talking earlier about Moon Dance and
Mm-hmm.
songs like Tupelo Honey and all that. His I think the soul in his music came out
Mm-hmm.
later. I think people went, "Oh, damn, that's good stuff," right? And then they felt that connection to him. I mean, growing up and hearing Van Morrison, Brown Eyed Girl, I mean, that was, you knew, right? You knew. But then
Oh, yeah.
later on in life, I discovered so much more about his music. And then
Mm-hmm.
it felt like it was more relevant to me. I don't know why that is, but maybe growing up and understanding it better, but it just was that soothing soul music that you can just put on and you just enjoy. He
Mm-hmm.
created that sound himself. Like you said, with all the mixtures of different genres, he's been able to create something that's very unique, and it's him. When you hear a Van Morrison song.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll now take a look at the decade of the 90s. The early to mid 1990s were commercially successful for Van Morrison, with 3 albums reaching the top 5 in the UK charts. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think like you pointed out, his music just keeps growing as he grows, right? Like it just keeps being successful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so, with 3 albums reaching the top 5 in the UK charts, he had sold out concerts and more visible public profile. But this period, it was really, really a successful decade for him, very positive. Now, we take a look at the decade of 2000 to 2009. Van Morrison, he continued to record and tour in the 2000s, often performing 2 or 3 times a week.
Wow. Yeah.
How good is that? Man, that's moving it. He's moving like Jagger. He formed his own independent label, Exile Productions Limited. And what this effectively did, Dave, it enabled him to maintain full production and control of each album he records, which he then delivers as a finished product to the recording label that he chooses for marketing and distribution. This is huge,
Yep.
just really huge for him. And the album Down the Road, for instance, it was released in May of 2002. It received a good critical reception and proved to be his highest charting album in the United States since 1972's St. Dominic's Preview. Wow. It had nostalgic tone with its 15 tracks representing the various musical genres. Here again, the variety of musical genres. Morrison, he had previously covered, mentioning earlier the R&B, the blues, country, and folk. One of the tracks was written as a tribute to his late father, George, who had played a pivotal role in nurturing Van Morrison's early musical tastes. And how fitting is that? That is very, very good. Now, in July of 2005, Morrison was named by Amazon as one of their top 25 all-time best-selling artists inducted into the Amazon.com Hall of Fame.
Interesting.
I never knew there was an
Me neither. I was
Amazon.com
gonna
Hall
say.
of Fame. Oh, okay. Geez, Amazon's getting into everything. Anyway, later in that year, Morrison also donated a previously unreleased studio track to a charity album called Hurricane Relief Come Together Now. And the money raised from these relief efforts from the Gulf Coast, these were the victims of Hurricane Katrina and Rita. They made a wonderful, wonderful contribution to these people who suffered during those 2 hurricanes off the Gulf Coast. Very, very good. In the year of 2007, another album, The Best of Van Morrison Volume 3, was released. And part of the proceeds from that also went to help the people for the hurricane relief program. And hey, how good is that? That's better than good. So a new double CD compilation album, The Best of Van Morrison Volume 3, as I mentioned earlier, released in June of 2007. It contained 31 tracks, some of which were previously unreleased. The greatest hits, what it was a 37-track double CD compilation album, and it was released in October 22nd, 2007.
I have that CD, and it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh
it
my
just,
God.
You can just put it on, and away you go. You get lost in it. Usually when they're that long, you tire of it, but his stuff, you just don't, because I think it, like you said earlier, it crosses different areas, different genres, and he can pull it off where you're like going from one, from Gloria to Tupelo Honey to, you know what I mean? It just works. I recommend that CD to anybody who doesn't have it. It's excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll now take a look at the years from 2010 to 2020. Morrison released 2 albums in the first half of the decade, followed by a further 6 albums in just 5 years. His productivity increasing noticeably as he turned 70. Wow. So going very strong at 70 years young. In 2015, Morrison sold the rights to most of his catalog to Legacy Recordings, and the catalog division, which is a catalog division of Sony Music. So right in there with Sony Music, and that was a good move on his part. This resulted in 33 of his albums being made available as digital releases, and also through all the streaming services for the first time ever.
Wow.
Wow. How
good is that? You got a good penny for that, I bet. Oof.
Yeah. Morrison's 70th birthday, the year was 2015, that wasn't too long ago, was marked by celebrations in his hometown of Belfast, commencing with BBC Radio Ulster, which presented programs including the top 70 Van tracks.
Oh, that's
That
cool.
is great.
Yeah.
That was Van Morrison's nickname. Here comes the van.
Yeah. That makes sense. That
is so classic, so classic. And in September of 2017, Van Morrison released the album Roll with the Punches. And that's exactly what he is doing. Rolling with the punches. In November of 2020, just 4 years ago, Morrison and Eric Clapton, they collaborated on a single called Stand and Deliver. And those profits from the sales there were donated to Morrison's Lockdown Financially Hardship Fund.
Interesting.
I never knew of that. In March of 2021, Morrison announced that his 42nd album, Latest Record Project Volume 1, would be released by Exile Productions on May the 7th of 2020. In 2023, just last year, he returned to his roots with Moving on Skiffle and Accentuate the Positive. 2 excellent albums. Morrison performed for the Edmonton Folk Music Festival in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, on August the 4th of 2010 as the headliner act for the fundraiser, and scheduled a second day headliner in London and that was in Finsbury Park in London.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
busy guy.
Just never stops.
Where does he get all the energy, Dave?
I don't know.
God. Now, I'd like to, just before we finish up on his accomplishments and awards, it's noteworthy of his collaborations. Van Morrison has collaborated extensively with a variety of artists throughout his career, working with many legends in soul, blues, you name it. Here are some of the legends he's worked with. And this is wow, it's a who's who reading of collaborations of artists. Excuse me.
And you can start right at the last waltz, really. I mean, that
Yeah.
was one of the ones that I first saw him live and was like blown away by his talent, surrounded by such mega
Definitely.
stars that were on that stage that evening in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Some of the artists he collaborated with, John Lee Hooker, Ray Charles, George Benson, Eric Clapton, like, wow, B.B. King, the Chieftains, who are the top band, have been in Ireland for years now, Gregory Porter, Josh Stone, the late Natalie Cole, Mark Knopfler, and none other also than Canada's own Michael Bublé.
Yes, I did read
Wow.
that. Yeah, that's cool.
That's a who's who list, I'll tell you right there. Okey Dinah. That is fantastic. So Morrison, he has received several major music awards in his career. Of course, 2 Grammy Awards with 5 additional nominations, inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in January of 1993, the Songwriters Hall of Fame, June 2003, the Irish Music Hall of Fame, September 1999, the Brit Award, February 1994, and in addition, he has received several civil awards, of course, the OBE. He also has honorary doctorates from the University of Ulster and from Queen's University, not here in Canada, but Queen's University in Belfast in July of 2001. Now, the Hall of Fame inductions, as I mentioned, began in 1993. And as you can see, he was well recognized and he was well rewarded for his musical geniuses. However, Morrison was the first living inductee not to attend his own ceremony. Oh, but Robbie Robertson from the band, he accepted the award on Van Morrison's behalf. How good is that?
I can't beat that.
Wow, Robbie Robertson. Yeah. Now, when Morrison became the initial musician inducted into the Irish Hall of Fame, Bob Geldof,
cool,
familiar name,
yeah,
presented Morrison with the award. And Morrison's third induction was at the Songwriters Hall of Fame for recognition of his unique position as one of the most important songwriters of the past century. And none other than Ray Charles. Ray Charles presented the award following a performance during which the pair performed Morrison's Crazy Love.
That's pretty
cool. How
cool.
good is that?
I have to see if there's a video somewhere on that. That's pretty neat.
Yeah. Wow. And 3 of Morrison's songs appeared in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's top 500 songs of all time. Of course, Brown Eyed Girl, Madame George, and of course, Moondance, just to mention a few. So you can see he has had quite an honor of recognition. Really, though, I think he has to thank his mother and dad for not really pushing him into music. I think the talent was there.
Seems like his destiny.
But with the inspiration of his dad, he cultivated it.
Yeah,
Would you agree, Dave?
I think it was his destiny by far. Just when you look at that, and his, like you said, that early start was so critical. And it sounds like he just fell in love with music and it was his life. You know what I mean? Anything I've read on him, that seems to be true. Can I ask you, what's your favorite Van Morrison song?
Yeah, just unbelievable. And his mother, a singer too, but
Yep.
she was also an exceptional dancer.
What's your favorite Van Morrison? Do you have one that's kind of not?
I would say it's got to be Brown Eyed Girl with a close second, Moondance.
I gotta go Into the Mystic. I don't know what that song just captivates me, but you know how certain songs just resonate. But yeah, I love those. Don't get me wrong. It's just a personal preference, that one, but I don't know. There's something about it, and it just seems like it's speaking to me, I guess. But yeah, his music is just phenomenal. Just like you said, it kids listen to it, right? Like you can DJ and probably throw on Brown Eyed Girl, like you said, everybody's going to know it. It doesn't matter the age group. It's just
absolutely
it just carries on. It's got that much nobility to it. It seems that it's one of those songs that just doesn't go away. His reference point too, like you said, I think crossing the genres. I know we keep going back to that, but I think that was so critical for him because he was taking all these different styles and pulling in little pieces of them, right, and making his music and his lyrics were so good. It just all fit, and you never knew with him from one album to the next what you're going to get as far as the sound, right? Because he could flip it, right? He could be, like sound like Sinatra in one part, and then all of a sudden it's that very quiet, sensible song on the other part. You just didn't know what to expect with him, and the lyrics were, always sound good.
Absolutely, and that covers our history of Van Morrison. There, Dave. I just received this. Wow, this is if I could just share this with with our audience. Christmas comes early for Bob Dylan. Fans this week after the legendary singer-songwriter unveiled plans to release a massive box set chronicling his 1974 concert tour with the band. How good is that?
Holy smokes.
It's a 27-disc collection, and it will feature 431 tracks and include the full recordings of 27 of the 40 shows on that tour, including a gig at Toronto's Maple Leaf Gardens, Columbia Records, Legacy Recordings. Wow, unbelievable. And Dylan's 1974 tour marked his first outing in 8 years, and it reunited him with the band, who were formed in Toronto and backed by the musician nearly a decade earlier. In the interviewing years, the band had become notable in their own right, and certainly so, Mr. Danko, playing Woodstock and releasing their own albums. So Bob Dylan's,
new release. That's cool.
He is.
And he, like Van Morrison, are still touring today. That's crazy.
That's right. So
they're
Bob Dylan, the band, Van Morrison,
they're still going. Which is, Dylan and Van Morrison are still touring. I just read that Van Morrison's playing in LA. I think coming up this summer or something. But that's pretty unique too. Like you said, with 60 years in the music industry and still doing live shows at their ages. Kudos to them. They stay in shape and they keep going. I think that's I think that's all they know. I think that's how they survive, right? Like, if you said to Dylan, you can't tour anymore, well, I don't know what that would do to him. It's just what he knows. It's what the same with Van Morrison. It's what they do. It's what they're good at.
Yeah. And the wealth of experience that Van Morrison has gained over the years from performing, collaborating with all these big time artists puts him right in the helm. And cool. A great history, Sir Van Morrison.
Thanks for doing this today.
One of the best in the world for music. And I'm not just talking rock music. I'm talking the different genres that we had discussed earlier in the program. Sir Van Morrison.
Thanks, Randy. What a show. I just sit here and listen to you talk about it because there were so many good facts that you brought up today and so much information I didn't know. And thank you for sharing that with your research and what you find out. It's kind of cool.
You're most welcome, Dave.
We're able to go
really
through those
enjoyed
things.
it, Van Morrison. A lot of good memories. And yes, I did see him come through the airport on
There
2
it is.
occasions.
Did
Yes,
you?
I
Did
did.
you? Did you
When I
get the
was
nerve
working
up
at
to talk
Toronto
to him or no?
International.
Did you talk to him, or did you
Just
say
said
hi?
hello and continued success. And he said, "Oh, thank you very much." He was on his way to the O'Keefe Center, I believe. Yes, he was on his way to perform that evening at the O'Keefe Center.
What year
I'm
roughly
dating
was that?
myself when I
What
say
year?
that,
I was
but
just going to ask you, what year was
a
that
lot
roughly?
of the artists played at O'Keefe Center, Carnegie Hall, whereas now they have probably at least 12 major performance centers or more in the Greater Toronto area for the artists to strut
Do you,
their stuff.
do you remember what year he came through the airport that you met him? Do you remember?
Let's see. That would have been 1970, July of 1973 or July of 1974.
That's cool. Yeah, just right there.
And
at
it
his
was definitely the
pinnacle, too.
summertime.
Excellent. Wow, thanks for sharing that. I always love when you tell me those little tidbits that you always save them right to the end. I like that.
Yeah.
All right.
A bit of a kind of added extra.
Yeah. Take care. And I look forward to you next month. One of the people I'd like you to, if you have time, we should talk about off air, and maybe we'll let folks know this is coming up maybe down the road, is Tom Petty. We got to do Tom Petty, man.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
We got to
Very
reach
good.
out and you know, that music was very strong in when I was growing up, and he was such a big influence, and all the way through to the Wilburys when he's hanging out with George Harrison, Dylan, and you know, that was to me just another. That was a true supergroup in my opinion. All right, I'm gonna let you go. Take care.
You have a
great
good
day.
week, Dave. Drive safely, and we'll talk to you next month.
You bet.
Thank you.